Didn't do anything physically, but had an emotional affair. And then my marriage never recovered. I went through divorce. Well, at the time, I was a pastor and a marriage counselor, and I had to come to an end of myself and recognize that, oh my gosh, there was something deeper going on inside of me. So that began a 10-year journey of not only, talking about what I'm doing, but understanding what was going on inside of Greg. And then it kind of culminated in the last couple of years where I developed my 3 books, all dealing with, negative emotions and walking into them, that each of us had to face them. We have to face them. But on the other side of those negative emotions comes freedom and peace. Like I can say that I'm at more peace than I've ever been. I am stronger now than I've ever been, but I had to put down the microscope and pick up the mirror and walk that journey. So that's in a nutshell my story. I'm sticking to it.
Driven by purpose, fueled by passion, my words got power, my thoughts have action, motivation, stay gracious, that's greatness, be audacious, be audacious.
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, where our mission is to inspire you to live your best audacious life ever. I'm your host, Audley Stevens, and it's always a pleasure to be here with you. And I really want to take the time to thank you for joining us on this journey of self-discovery and personal growth. Now, I want you to think of life like skiing down a mountain. As you navigate the slopes, you'll encounter both smooth runs and rough patches. Just like negative emotions can feel like obstacles, they actually provide valuable insight into what's happening inside of us. They remind us to pause, reflect, and grow. In skiing, have the teachability to adjust our stance or technique makes us all the difference in conquering those tricky turns. In the same way, personal growth calls for teachability, the willingness to learn from challenges, refine our approach, and align our lives with a clear mission that guides our effectiveness as individuals and leaders. Our guest today is Dr. Greg Stewart. He's a seasoned counselor, coach, and an author specializing in emotional intelligence and organizational leadership with a rich background in counseling, pastoral work, and executive coaching. Dr. Greg embodies the belief that self-awareness and emotional healing are the cornerstones of our personal success and strong relationships. His mission is to help people unlock their potential and make a meaningful impact in their lives and of the lives of others. In today's episode, Dr. Greg shares deep insights on harnessing negative emotions, the power of teachability, and how conscious choices lead to peace and purpose. His perspective will help us all navigate life's slopes with more confidence and clarity. So without any further ado, let's dive into this enlightening conversation with Dr. Greg Stewart. Enjoy. Hey, Greg, thank you for joining me here today on the Audacious Living Podcast. I appreciate you taking the time to be here. So thank you for doing this.
Well, the honor is, of course, mine. Thank you for having me on, sir.
Yeah, no, it's great. Oftentimes talk about how, how much a blessing it is to sit down and chat with individuals about the work they do and kind of the difference they're making in the world, and even just the opportunity to share their stories. We can learn so much from each other's journeys, and that we can use to help ourselves. And so, to be a part of that process that perhaps can help other people. Again, it truly is a blessing. And we sort of talk a lot on this podcast about how life is a journey. We use the analogy of a pathway, right? Life is very much a journey that we're all on our own individual path. And, there are things that will come up that may impede us, block us. Think of a boulder kind of in our pathway, right? And we've got to figure out how to maneuver that, get over it, get under it, around it, whatever, because kind of on the other side is sort of where our greatness lies. And you play a strong hand in sort of helping people work through some of those negative situations or negative moments or those obstacles that seem insurmountable. And so, and again, through your work and your pastor as well. So I think all of these things sort of feed into to the work that you do. And so maybe as a starting point, and I should say a doctor too, Greg. So I'm saying all these things that you're doing, but that's part of your menu of options that you offer to people. So maybe as a starting point, I can get you to introduce yourself, talk about the work that you do, and what's got you to the point that you're at now.
All right. So background, I'm gonna start super early, but don't worry, it'll go fast. So back when I was back in the 70s, way back in the 70s, I attended junior church and accepted Jesus as my savior, as a lot of people did back in the day. Well, my parents quit going to church, which meant I quit going to church. And then I did those party hardy teen years and then suffered the consequences from those years and then recommitted life to Christ when I was 20. I landed back at the church that I attended at as a child. Then I felt this strong urging and calling to go into the ministry. So the pastor suggested I take a short-term missions trip in 1993 in Guyana, South America. So I spent the summer down there and was officially called. Well, after I got back, I did a year of Bible Institute and then did an internship at the same church that I was at. But I realized that, I wanted to get onto seminary, but I didn't have a bachelor's degree. So back in the 90s, if you remember that, it's when there's a lot of us that had like 160 credit hours, but no degree. So they started like adult and continuing ed programs, like one night a week for a year and you get a degree. Well, the degree that they offered back then, I was just starting up, was in organizational leadership. Loved the material, but I wanted to get onto seminary. In my first semester of seminary, I took philosophy of counseling, and then my eyes were opened up to the just the power of that knowledge and information, plus how many issues I had, of course, right? So I mapped out a dual master's degree and got a Master of Divinity in 3 years, the Greek, Hebrew, and theology, and then worked on my Master of Arts in Counseling. But right in between there in the year 2000, it was kind of like a perfect storm, another defining moment where I came across the book Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. When actually I was on vacation, was drinking coffee, perusing the psychology section in Barnes and Noble. And then I actually started teaching as an adjunct professor in all the organizational leadership courses I took in my undergrad and fell in love with organizational leadership. And at the same time, I was underneath a leader who was great in so many ways, but just had a lot of personal struggles. So I got my master's in counseling, became the senior pastor at the church, and then I started my PhD in counselor education supervision from Regent University. But I did my dissertation on the relationship of emotional intelligence with job satisfaction and organizational commitment. Okay. So during the 2000s, I was an adjunct professor, I was a pastor, I was a counselor. And then in 2008, I started becoming, cut my organizational development and executive coaching teeth at a powerful medical device company in Michigan, where I'm from. And it kind of evolved from there. Well, I left the church and had a great experience and then moved to Texas and worked for 3 years at a assessments company where I flew around the country doing consulting and leadership development. It was phenomenal. Then I worked at a behavioral health hospital, working with troubled teenagers. So I've had a wonderful experience and career. But what I always want to say is, after all that experience, after all that knowledge and degrees, back in 2011, what made me come back to earth, if you will, is I had an emotional affair. Didn't do anything physically, but had an emotional affair. And then my marriage never recovered. I went through divorce. Well, at the time, I was a pastor and a marriage counselor, and I had to come to an end of myself and recognize that, oh my gosh, there was something deeper going on inside of me. So that began a 10-year journey of not only, talking about what I'm doing, but understanding what was going on inside of Greg. And then it kind of culminated in the last couple of years where I developed my 3 books, all dealing with, negative emotions and walking into them, that each of us had to face them. We have to face them. But on the other side of those negative emotions comes freedom and peace. Like, I can say that I'm at more peace than I've ever been. I am stronger now than I've ever been, but I had to put down the microscope and pick up the mirror and walk that journey. So that's, in a nutshell, my story. I'm sticking to it.
No, I love that, and I love the see when you can sort of stop and kind of look back at that path, and you'll sort of see where everything makes sense and why that journey was the way it was. In the moment, we got no idea, Greg. We're just kind of winging it. We're trying to figure it out. We're trying to take all these different experiences. But in that moment, when you come to that realization, it all kind of comes together like a puzzle. It makes sense to you, and so you definitely did that. But anyhow, back to your journey. I think it's an important one, and so I really appreciate that you share that. And I would imagine that because of where you're at now, you have an appreciation for what you've gone through and what you've experienced. Even again, the dissolving of your marriage. There was a lot that's there's lots of things that come from these experiences. Can you sort of talk about that shift when you realize, hey, again, you talk about the microscope versus a mirror. That shift. What was sort of the impetus? What made that happen? Was it something external or something you said yourself? I got to do. What was that process like for you? I'm curious.
So we actually began with so the fair, the 6 months of fair, there it is. Wave away, brother. There we go. That's okay. Matter of fact, it looked kind of cool with the dark theme in it. So after it was 6 months, and then in January, it was January 31st of 2012, actually my sister's birthday in 2012, where I was talking to a counselor, and I was lamenting, and I was saying I feel like I'm pursuing everybody harder than they're pursuing me, and I just started rambling, and then all they'd say, I said, I just want them to make my world. And right there, I had this kind of vision from God where I saw all this table with all these dominoes on the table, and all these faces were on top of the dominoes. And I couldn't make out the individual faces, but I knew that it was people that I knew. And the vision was that the Spirit of God came in and didn't just blow the dominoes over, he blew them off the table. And he said, I make your world. So from that insecurity that was being exposed in me, that turned into me needing pursuit from other people
Right.
to validate me, to encourage me, and what have you. And then God coming in and filling that, saying, I'm the one that makes your world. So that began the process of uncovering. And the key thing is I use a tenet in my book called that all negative emotions exposing something in me. So when you have negative emotions, a lot of times those emotions get inflated. We have to stop, because our negative emotions, actually, what do? Everybody does, is when we have negative emotions, we start processing the external person or thing that's causing them, right?
It must be,
So
someone else, right? Not me.
Right. So like if you call me a name, which, you have several times, right? Wink, right? So I might have to like set a boundary with you saying, hey, sir, that's not okay. But if on a scale of 1 to 10, you calling me a name is like a 1, right? I mean, what degree of impact does you saying something mean about me take? And then how much emotional energy, so I say emotion as energy, do I take to address it? Well, it's like a 1. I said, well, please don't call me that. But if I'm at a 6, 7, or 8 of that negative emotional energy, that inflation
Right.
is not your issue. It's mine, right? So right at that point, it's really the recognition at the inflation of emotion that honestly, my emotional energy is far greater than what the situation deserves. That's actually exposing something in me. And that recognition where I honestly, I would not let myself off the hook, right? And this is what I encourage everybody to do. You can't let yourself off the hook. You've got to say, okay, what's being exposed in me? So that began a journey in my first book, just I cubed information, interpretation, intensity. Yep. I have a trilogy where that exposure, working into the inflation, negative emotion, which there's 3 causes of that. It's we believe lies about the situation, or we take it personally, which means it's impacting our identity, value, and worth, or that inflation of emotions coming from previous trauma. So that's right. That's my first book. But then I did IQ for couples, where it's facing our negative emotions to build intimacy in marriage. Because again, my wife is not responsible for my inflation of negative emotions. I've got to walk into it. But then I use a lot of marriage techniques, communication, because half my caseload and I see about 40 clients a week in telehealth. So about half of them are couples, which then led to my third book, which is the one I'm promoting now, is IQ for leaders, right? This one's different though. This one, we take the negative emotions and we turn it into vision, passion, and calling. And so the subtitle of this book, brother, is Unleash the Rage of Negative Emotions Against the Obstacles of Becoming More. So this one has a completely different take, where you look at it, injustice in the world, something that is hurting the human experience, hurting other people, and it comes from our own experiences. And we unleash the rage and we become more than what we are. So I have what's called a becoming more quotient, where how to help people develop leaders. So it's about all those negative emotions that we all experience.
Yes.
But we have to uncover them, to be honest, with what's kind of being exposed in us. But then we can use those negative emotions to create a vision and a mission to change the world.
I love just the rechanneling or repurposing of that negative emotion, right? I mean, as a counselor, I mean, emotion oftentimes is an insight into something going on, right? So if you've got these strong
Yep.
emotions about something, what's happening? And it could be positive or negative, so it's not just one way. But I think what's really fascinating about that is, and even what you described, what we're doing is taking back our power, right? It's
Yes.
so easy to say so and so made me do this, or
Yeah.
I did this because so and so made it happen. Well, so and so might have done something to you, but what comes out of that is on you. And that's what you have total
Yes.
control. So it's really about taking back the control as opposed to giving it away and saying, "Well, I didn't have control. I couldn't help myself." We could, and that's really the key in what you're saying.
Yeah, and I so appreciate you bringing that up because honestly, as far as like the purpose of these books, the mission is there's an element where I want to go into our culture because our culture is believing the big lie that the environment or other people are responsible for my emotional health and
Mm-hmm.
happiness. And it's not a matter. Like I actually talk about bullying a lot. And I said, all this energy and effort has gone into stop the bullying, which it should. Okay, I'm going to pause. It should be nice to people, show grace to people, love people. That should happen. However, we should equally be putting as much energy and effort into helping people not be bullied
Right.
because I have the power whether or not they impact me. And when I talk about identity, value, and worth, I say one thing that we have to make decision as adults is that I don't need them to pursue me, validate me, approve of me. I want them to, but I don't need them to. And should
Yes.
we encourage, approve, right? Yes, we should do that to other people. But the
Yes.
difference is need versus want. And that gives me the power over my environment. The definition of relationship doesn't change. It's still safety and pursuit. I talk about my couples book. Safety and pursuit is the definition of relationship. So we need to be safe, emotionally, relationally safe with each other. And
Okay.
yes, we need to pursue each other. But I don't need my wife to pursue or validate me. I want her to. I just don't need her to. I am secure in Greg that
Right.
my value and worth is set by the Lord above and Greg, that I don't need another human being
Mm.
to bring me value and worth. So it is a both and for
So when
sure. Take the power back.
So when someone says, and we've heard this, that, this person brings me happiness, or this person, you'll hear expressions like, this individual completes me, or things like that type of language, that kind of speech. I think that's essentially what I'm hearing. That you're touching on that in fact, that is not the case, that
Mhm.
these individuals are an addition to, but not the completion of.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm actually I get it as far as complete me. I get the romantic side of it because the Lord has designed that man and women come together. The opposites attract, right? So my
Yes,
wife
yes.
is exactly the opposite of Greg, and that I look to her in order to help me become more mature. So I'm okay. Again, that's the beauty of it is it doesn't change the definition or standards of relationship that I know that God's going to use my wife to help me become more like him, right? So as far as the complete, yeah, and even the way the Lord created marriage, it's the two shall become one. So that's where the element is. It's being okay with that. That's why instead of like when I was a pastor for 15 years, I loved it when couples switched from the candle, lighting the candle,
Okay.
to doing the two different colors of sand
Ah,
because the
yes, yes,
two different
yes.
colors of sand, right? They're inseparable now, but yet I'm going to stand alone before God at the end, and so is my wife, right? So we are separate, but we are still one within that. So that's a much better metaphor, if you will. Every metaphor falls apart at some point, but that's the key, right? So the Lord wants us to be reliant and dependent upon each other in that sense, but when it comes to value and worth, no, it's
Right.
between us and Him. There's
Gotcha.
the difference. It's a
Yeah.
both and I would say.
Yeah,
Yep.
no, no, I definitely hear that. I think it's an important distinction, and one that um, I think people need to pay attention to. And if they are looking for that external thing to give them the value and worth, I think there's some, and to what to what you're saying, it's worth some time investigating as to where that's coming from, and why that is, and are we tapping into something deeper that perhaps you've got blinders you're unaware of.
Yeah. So in the process of, doing that. Again, it is this beauty of the inflation of emotions where I have to walk into them, and that's where the healing takes place. So again, whether it be I'm believing lies about the situation,
Yep.
or it's impacting my value and worth, or it's from previous trauma, big
Mhm.
T or little T trauma. But again, out of that, so out of that comes our healing, and out of that comes our mission. Because every time I help somebody develop their mission statement, right? So our mission statement is that going after some injustice in the world, it is always, and this is God designed, it's always from our life, personal life experiences. We either have experienced something or we've observed something that created a fire inside of us. And that fire inside of us is the thing that creates our mission statement, right?
Gotcha.
I
Gotcha.
call it the Iron Man core, like saw the movie, right? So
Sure.
this Iron Man core like went into his chest to keep that shrapnel, that high tech shrapnel, from burrowing into his heart.
Right. Art.
Well, the Iron Man core becomes this inexhaustible energy source for mission. But what it does is, without that Iron Man core, that shrapnel, which I call life's annoyances like traffic and
Yeah.
the weather, whatever it is, can kill our chest. And one thing I always like pointing out is I cannot tell you how many people, I cannot tell you, who reach out to me for counseling that are in their mid 30s, who basically are saying, I'm successful, I have a good life, but is this it? And what they're missing is that Iron Man core. They're missing that purpose. It is a human
Yes.
thing that God has designed us to have, that Iron Man core. So then I help them uncover through the creation of the mission statement, finding out about their life experiences, to where that becomes this inexhaustible energy source where it is, I now found my purpose, my destiny, my legacy. And that is what we're looking for,
I
right?
love
Because
it.
that takes away number one is all those life annoyances, but it also gives us purpose and destiny to improve everyone else, because we're not here to live just for ourselves. We're here to help the
Yeah.
human experience.
And what I love about that is that those annoyances, they're almost like the equivalent of like a fly now. You just kind of shoo it away, right?
Yes.
Like, and that's because you've built up yourself. You're very clear on who you are, what you're about. You know what your strengths are. You know what your weaknesses are. You know what makes you happy. You know your sweet spot. You know all of these things. And so now, as you on your journey, you're on that pathway, you're going along. That we talked about, something happens, you're like, yeah, whatever, because you're very clear on where you're going. And so the work putting into knowing where you're going and knowing your purpose and having that vision, it's so critical.
Yeah, and like I was watching an interview. Obviously, we're Charlie Kirk being in the news this last week, and just there, he was at a conference about entrepreneurs. So think about the entrepreneur. The entrepreneur is just like what you said. They're just yeah. That's annoying and stuff, but and they just this energy is flowing from them about what they're calling. And then I don't care if it's Charlie Kirk or the guy that was interviewing was actually a CEO of many restaurants. So, regardless of your industry, everybody has this commonality of, I have this inexhaustible core because I want to reach a goal. I want to create a vision. I want to, because I say this is important, that every job ever, every technological advancement ever is either trying to solve a human problem or enhance the human experience,
Right.
right? So Howard Schultz in Starbucks, he wanted to create his experience. Matter of fact, when I wrote about 90% of this book, I was on a cruise, and I address it in my book that obviously cruises are not solving any human problem.
No. No.
They are enhancing the human
Enhancing it.
experience. All
Right.
right. So whatever it is, it could be both, that you just create this vision of there's so much more to the human experience, right? And that becomes your vision. Or it's like, you know what? I've got to solve this problem, because the problem, and this is where God agrees with you, the problem, whether it be poverty or trafficking or
Yep.
whatever, racism, whatever the problem is, God agrees with you that it's an eradication of the human soul. And it angers him like it angers you, but we've got to go from the surface topic down to the eradication of the human soul. And then you turn that into a mission and vision, saying, my mission is to have every person I engage with
Yes.
automatically feel, when they walk away from me, inherent value and worth, because I see them.
Yeah.
I just created a mission statement right there, right? Because I see them.
Yeah. I think, and I think that is. it does so much, right? When you create, your personal mission statement, it allows you to now move through life in a walk of authenticity. That's truly being yourself. And I've always said, in fact, I just had a conversation with someone, the other day about just regret, and if I were to identify a regret for myself, and I think it'd be hold true for a lot of people, is that you never used your true gifts. You never use what uniquely belonged to you, because ultimately, I really believe that if I'm using my gifts, it's going to have a benefit to someone else, because I'm not here alone, right? I think our gifts were meant to help and aid and be a support and enhance the human experience, as you said. I gave an example. Like, but if we're using ours, that's what they do. And so if I move through life not doing that, then I'm not being authentic to myself, and therein lies the I guess you want to call it regret, if you will. Like, I didn't use my skills to the best of my ability to help others people.
Yeah. So we talk about like the wisdom, right? So we always kind of thrust ourselves to that point where we're at the end of our life sucking on oxygen, right?
Yeah.
And we always know this, that what are the things that we're going to remember, right? So everybody says that we're not going to think about and say, I wish I would have spent more time at the office. However, what we are going to, there's going to be two things in which we're going to reflect on: relationships, because who's going to be there at the end? And secondly, legacy. And that's the key when it comes to regrets. My next book, matter of fact, is How to Feel Forgiveness. Because when it comes to regrets, the regrets not only come from things we didn't do, it comes from the things we did do, right? So like, we overcome both by doing what we should do, which is following our mission and vision, but also it's how do we recover from our failures and weaknesses? It's, can we say about ourselves that, you know what, I figured out the core problem and I changed, I became someone different and stronger. And I tell all the listeners that if you've done that, more to come in the book, but if you've done that, then there are no regrets, because the key is whether I screw up or somebody hurts me, to take either one of those items and become stronger because of it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
nothing from my past, as far as the negative, it all turns into me being more powerful than I am, repenting from and changing what the mistakes I'd made, but also other people who hurt me, and making that the component where I free them and I become stronger now than I've ever been. And that's the power. So no regrets means that I'm doing what I know I should do.
Yeah.
And also releasing the mistakes that I and others made against me by learning from them and growing stronger because of it. That way we can say at the end of our lives, it's about relationships and legacy.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Absolutely. And I love the take, and I'm in full agreement with you. I want to go back to negative emotions here. And I know you can, there's a rage of negative emotions, and sort of you talk about. And I want to maybe actually, can you define that, and then maybe talk about why it's valuable for just personal growth?
Yeah. Okay. So my first chapter is on becoming more. So my whole business, my brand is becoming more, counseling, coaching, and consulting, right?
Okay.
So my mission, my tagline, I should say, is everyone becomes what they want to, only some people think about becoming more. Now, the want simply has to do not with, well, I want to be president, right? No. The want has to do with our mental model, which is made up of our DNA, life experiences, and choices, right? At any point, our mental model is doing what it should do. It says, here, Greg, think about this, feel this, and do this. However, everyone becomes what they want. That's the first thing. I want to do what my mental model says. But some people stop and say, I want to become more than what my mental model is suggesting to me. Because a long time ago, I've decided that my mental model is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, right? So I have blind areas, and then the formulas in my mind by which I interpret information always need work, because I'm always seeing things off. So the rage comes from this idea twofold. One is that there's 100 Gregs on a bell curve. So I'm not comparing myself with others now. I'm comparing Greg with Greg.
Yep.
So there is 100 percentile Greg that is the best he can be as a husband, as a father, as a counselor, as a Christian, and so on. I want to reach that. So the rage is that my mental model is making mistakes. And I'm like, I want to become more. And the obstacles, so like I define as far as leaders, the whole book is on leadership.
Yeah.
But in order to be a leader, leaders overcome obstacles everybody else wishes they could overcome. But those obstacles first begin here inside me.
Yes.
That the leader cannot lead other people without overcoming the internal obstacles to make them influential, because leadership is influence, using John Maxwell's definition. Real simple.
Yep.
Leadership is influence.
Yep. That's right.
So to overcome the obstacles is that you cannot impart what you do not possess. So you have to overcome the obstacles internally, where other people can look at you and say, man, how did you do it? I want to meet with you. You become an influencer. So the rage is that overcoming the obstacles is Greg's mental model. It's Greg's selfishness, Greg's impulsivity, Greg's blindness, Greg's mental model. That's the rage that I become. But then I go into chapter 2, which is the becoming more quotient, which I have 4 components of leadership. And I always tease people and say, look, if you can find a book, an article, a quote, anything on leadership that doesn't fall into those 1 or 4 categories, I'll buy you lunch, which I still have my money, right? So it's IQ. The first one is IQ. So people with high IQs, they're going to be influential, right?
Yes.
So we're born with that. We can't do anything about that, but we maximize our IQ through formal and informal, more importantly, informal education, right?
Right.
So then we maximize our IQ through critical thinking skills. So critical thinking is a skill we learn regardless of what the IQ is.
Yes.
Secondly, is this combination of number 2, personality, and number 3, emotional intelligence. So personality, like I don't know how you can discuss leadership without discussing our temperament, our personality, extrovert, introvert, right? Because honestly, all of our leadership weaknesses, we hurt people, and we've experienced when people take their strengths too far, so on and so forth. So I say personality ran through the machine of emotional intelligence. Personality ran through the machine of EI equals our interpersonal effectiveness, right? But number 4 is our spiritual development and destiny. Now, obviously, we talk about, the great debate over whether it was Hitler was a great leader. He was a great leader. He just lacked this last component.
Right.
Right. Spiritual development. Right.
I mean, that's
he
a really
had high
distinction.
IQ, right? He had personality and he had emotional intelligence, but he lacked spiritual development and destiny. And that's the key. Where we join forces with God, create a mission statement where that becomes the unleashing of the rage is I use that in order to impact the human race. So those 4 components, IQ, EQ, personality, and then spiritual development and destiny. That's the unleashing it.
And compassion would kind of fit under the EQ, right? Being compassionate. That's where that would fit.
Yeah. Compassion as well as spiritual development.
Okay.
Right. Again, the spiritual development, I'm a Christian, but like every religion, right? Regardless of what religion you are, every religion teaches morality, right? And every religion teaches wisdom. So regardless, right? So Jesus came full of grace and truth, right? So there's compassion. Compassion means to suffer with. It's the Latin form of suffer with. That's where the passion of the Christ comes, the suffering of the Christ. Empathy is from the Greek word pathos. Pathos means suffering. Empathos and sympathos, suffer with. That's, my goodness, like if you don't have compassion, empathy, and sympathy, there's no way you can grow without that.
That's right.
Because again, another way is just intellectually that you have information that I don't have in my brain. So I use something called proactive teachability. Like if we knew each other better, I'd say, sir, like, tell me how I can grow. Tell me where I'm blind.
Right.
I often tease people like, are you a good listener? Well, yeah, I think so. Well, have you ever asked people that you're talking to if they feel heard by you? Are you a great parent? Yeah, I think so. Have you ever asked your kids? Right? Now I'm getting personal, right? Are you a great spouse? Same thing. Have you ever asked your spouse?
Well, you make a really significant point here, because this is around getting outside of our own heads, right? And this is looking outside beyond us, and to ask those questions, like it's sometimes you'll get honest answers that you need to make sure you're ready for those responses, but you need to get outside of your head to get the true reflection of who you are, at least how you're showing up in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So, don't be afraid of it, because I talk about in my first book, Insecurity. Like, why be insecure? Insecure is something that I don't like about myself, which we all have that. That's not a big deal. It's just insecurity where it becomes insecure is I don't want it pointed out or exposed. That's where you get defensive. And that's bad. So don't be defensive, because if it's truth, we have to own it. But again, the truth will set you free. That's what frees you is own the truth. Like if I said to you, I say, hey, you talk to one of your employees or a peer, how can I grow? And they're going to be sweet about it. Well, I think you're great. I said, no, stop. Let's just stop right now. I want the 10% that's in the back of your brain that you would never tell me. I want that. Why? Two reasons. One is you could have an image of me that isn't true, and I would love the opportunity to correct it. Because if I came across a certain way, that's not who I am. I'm so sorry. But secondly, you could have insight into me that I don't have, that I'm blind to. I'm desperate for that information. Right. And we all know, and this is the beauty of it. Every single one of us knows that there are people in our life that we would desperately wish they would do that to us, ask us the question. Well, it's a human thing. Every human being knows that every other human being should ask that question in that way. You got to be proactively teachable.
Yep.
Right. And I like using teachability instead of like humility or vulnerability, because there's so much like baggage around those two words nowadays. You have to give a lot of disclaimers, but teachability, it's just like, look, be teachable, meaning it's more just straightforward. Right. So we all want to be teachable, but you got to be proactively teachable. You can't wait for people to come to you and give you that insight. You got to go after it, because how are you going to eradicate the blind area? Right? We all have them.
You're describing audacious as if I didn't know better.
Right. And that's it. So that's why. So like my first book, Unlock the Inner Strength Behind Your Negative Emotions.
Yes.
The second book, Facing Our Negative Emotions to Build Intimacy in Marriage. And third, Unleash the Rage of Negative Emotions. Right. So the negative emotions are there. They're not bad. But they speak volumes to us about ourselves.
I think that, and again, we sort of touched on it earlier that, if you can take, that negative emotion, harness it, channel it, and turn it into action, you repurpose it in a magical way that can make a real difference. Because it's real because there was emotion attached to it. Anything that has emotion to it, whether it's positive or negative, like it's real. It's not made up. It's not conjured. It's real. And so harnessing that to help fuel your vision, I think you got like an unstoppable force.
Yeah, because we all face it now. That's what I'm saying. It's like, especially nowadays, that you would take a completely different slant on negative emotion, because nowadays it's like, you made me feel bad, so that must mean you're bad. Because their goal is make me feel good because I don't like feeling bad about myself. Well, gee, Wally, I don't know what to tell you, but the way to growth, everybody grows through adversity. That is the pathway of growth, right? And then again, so it's happening. We're starting to see the pendulum swing, because I say this, when it comes to grace and truth, I use in all three of my books, grace and empathy without truth and boundaries is enablement. But truth and boundaries without grace and empathy is toxic. And we have this pendulum swinging both ways in our society and culture. And it's the combination of both. And when you're having a disagreement with somebody, you've got to make statements of grace of, look, I want to know the truth, and you've got truth, and I need your wisdom and insight, but you got to use truth, meaning what you just said is not okay, and it's not wrong. It's wrong, right? So grace and empathy without truth and boundaries is enablement. But truth and boundaries without grace and empathy is toxic. We have to accomplish both goals verbally in every conversation that's difficult.
Part of we sort of talked about the human experience earlier, and a key aspect of the human experience is the ability to make conscious choices. We all have them, and those conscious choices, they can go again wherever we choose to take them. That's where they are. But I do think they certainly play an instrumental role in even breaking through sort of limitations, personally and professionally. I wonder if you could talk about sort of what what goes the process of breaking these limitations and through conscious choices.
So in the process of, because again, we have that, but like I said, the blind area, and then the area that's not blind. So there's the Johari window, there's the open area. It's areas that you know about me, areas I know about myself. But then there is the closed area, the area that I know about me that you don't, but I'm hiding it. Then there's the hidden area. I'm clueless and you're clueless, right? But we have to uncover it. But then the blind area, right? So it's a combination of really the blind area along with the closed area. The closed area is the areas we're conscious about, which is everything in my books, right? So it's on. That's where. Why are you scared of bringing that clothes to the open. Now, again, I'm not saying that we just air our dirty laundry and all that, but what I'm saying is the closed area provides, we want to shrink it because it provides our consciousness, because it is the thing sitting there like the regrets
Yes.
that I don't want to believe about myself, right? Well, transform it. That those areas where I'm wounded and hurt, well, transform it. That's the consciousness by which we have to say, okay, I have to deal with this. And again, what I observe, both again, I always ask the question is like, has anybody ever had it harder than you? Has anybody ever gone through what's more difficult than you have and yet came out healed, whole, and powerful? Well, the slam dunk to all those examples is Viktor Frankl, who went through the Holocaust.
Yes.
And
Yes.
he said, the only power my captors do not have over me is the power of response. And he came out of the Holocaust and wrote Man's Search for Meaning, right? So to everybody who's been hurt and wounded, yes, empathy, grace and empathy for that hurt. But the truth is that there are people who've been through harder things than you have and yet came out healed and whole and can say, I'm stronger now than I've ever been. I wouldn't wish that upon anybody. That's a conscious choice. Otherwise, if we don't, we become wounded and bitter, right?
Yes.
And either self-righteous ourselves, we become entitled, or we become addicted, right? So in that process of, I am conscious of both what's happened to me and the choices that I made. So just in the consciousness of who I am,
Yep.
and then what I want to become more
Yeah.
than what you are.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'm
I,
speaking to what you're saying, you know.
yeah, and I think really goes back. We made a point earlier about that purpose, having a vision. Like those conscious choices are in line with the life that you're trying to live, that purpose you want to have, that vision that you see for yourself. Then that helps clear things away. So again, we talk about the annoyances being distractions. These limitations now become like, yeah, but this isn't getting me to where I want to go. And so that
Right.
vision becomes more and more clear to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's our goal. Our goal, honestly, is peace and joy.
Yes.
And I can have peace through becoming at peace with, what's happened to me. I can become at peace with my own bad choices, but also what creates power. So you have peace and power. What creates power is unleashing that rage against negative emotions, the obstacles to becoming more. Because when we do that, the whole point is when I become more than what I am,
Yep.
I can then come alongside other people, right? And help them unleash and become more than what they are. And that is the human experience. That is community. I don't care who you are. You come alongside other people that God brings in your life and you help them unleash the rage behind their negative emotions and the obstacles by showing them how. But you have to be able, you cannot impart what you don't possess. Help them do what you have done yourself. That's the greatest joy. So you have peace in the midst of pain, and you have joy turning that pain into power.
Got you. If someone could, only implement one strategy from your book, Greg, what would you recommend that be?
The I would say it begins with teachability. All personal growth begins with teachability. It's put down the microscope, pick up the mirror, right? That starts the process that it's a domino effect. If you put down that microscope and pick up the mirror of your negative emotions, it unleashes the domino effect.
That does. Okay, and so how would you recommend integrating someone kind of gets these insights into sort of everyday life while not being overwhelmed too? Because we're talking about some heavy stuff here, Greg, right? And
Great
it's
question.
easy to
Yeah.
say. I think it's easy to go do this, but it
Yeah,
is going to
yeah.
overwhelm you, right? All
Right,
risk it.
absolutely. So the first thing is I always tell when I meet with new clients, I say like the first two things is one is start building self-awareness around all negative emotions, right? They are there. So one is the negative emotions I feel, and then number two is assessing is there an inflation? Like how big of a deal is it that somebody is going slow in front of me? Right?
Right.
Personal confession. Okay. So one is the recognition of negative emotions. Number two is how big of a deal is it? And number three is I say that the most frequent thing that inflates our negative emotions are the lies in our brain. So I say emotions don't produce themselves. They come from sentences in our brain. Sentences are interpretation, beliefs, and ideas. You can do that all day, every day. Like say, for instance, I'll never get a job. That's a lie. Imagine the amount of negative emotion produced from that. So I say you have to replace, don't just dismiss, replace lies with truth. Because what's the truth? You could say that, honestly, if I'm honest with myself, because I could say this about myself years ago, is, I didn't really try all that hard in high school, and I kind of blew off college. So, the truth is that I don't know what kind of job I'm expecting to get. However,
Right.
right? However, if I work hard, learn a trade, if I work hard, go back to school, if I just work hard, period, I can become successful. So truth, right, is also incorporating the truth of negative, but also the truth of hope and positive, that I have the power, right? So I would say awareness of negative emotions, assess the inflation, but always go after those sentences of interpretation and replace lies with truth.
I love it. I love that process. I really, really do. And forces you to look at it. It forces you to examine everything. Really does, Greg. And take the blinders off. And you talk about developing self-awareness. I think that's a fabulous starting point. Give us the title of your book there again, Greg, and where listeners.
My IQ for Leaders is the third book, right? So I'll let IQ for Couples, and then my first book is just I Cubed, right? So all of it can be found at simply drgregstewart.com, DRGREGSTEWART, right? Just one word, drgregstewart.com. They're all there.
Gotcha. And what we'll do is make sure that the appropriate contact details are in the show notes below, and they can connect with you directly. Greg, this has been super, super informative, insightful. I love the dedication to really zeroing in, particularly with the conversation we had about the negative emotions, and really, really sort of keying in on that and understanding that it's not something that we shun and go, oh my gosh, and beat ourselves up because we have these negative emotions. But part of the process is, what do you do when they arrive? And I'm hearing that loud and clear. And I think that's a fabulous point for listeners to walk away with.
And thank you, sir. This is always an honor and pleasure. I love having the conversations with like-minded people who want to help other people grow. I mean, that's it. That's what creates a changed world right there.
Love it. I'm with you all the way, Greg. This has been fantastic. All the best, my friend. And thanks again for being a guest on the Audacious Living Podcast.
All right, take care, everybody. Bye-bye now. Bless you.
Welcome back to the podcast. What an insightful conversation with Dr. Greg. One of the key takeaways that really stood out to me was his focus on teachability as a catalyst for growth. Just as a great skier adapts to changing conditions on the mountain, we too must stay open to learning and understanding our emotions so we can move through obstacles and thrive. What I personally loved was how Dr. Greg took complex emotional concepts and made them practical. His ideas on turning negative emotions into motivation really hit home, and reminding me that every challenge we face is an opportunity to grow, evolve, and fine-tune our directions. If you'd like to learn more about Dr. Greg or connect with him directly, you can certainly connect with him through the contact details, which of course are in the show notes below, and I encourage you to check him out and connect with him. And I also want to take this opportunity to encourage you to if you, particularly if you've enjoyed this podcast, like, follow, subscribe, or share. And if you haven't shared with someone, please do so. Someone other who you think needs to hear this message. This, of course, is how we help the platform grow and evolve. I really do appreciate you for taking some time out of your day and joining us on another edition of the Audacious Living Podcast. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
Driven by purpose, fueled by passion. My words got power, my thoughts have action. Motivation, stay gracious. That's greatness. Be audacious.